Hello, I'm back. This is the first of the writing supports videos, so you're in the right place, so that's good. We're going to talk about how to write a good paper. How do you go about writing well? What is the process? And there is a process. There's various steps along the way that you're going to want to take, and we'll kind of describe all of those in fairly round terms, talk about them in a bit more detail in the next video. This seems like something that might be a little bit new to you, academic writing, but basically it's something that you do every day. You may be talking to a friend about a movie or a TV show. You want to say why it's good. You talk about the actors, you make your arguments. In the end, you come to some kind of a conclusion that, yeah, Brooklyn Nine-Nine actually is not too bad. It's worth watching. So it is a process that you kind of informally go through. You probably cut some steps. You don't do it necessarily very well. You're going to have to be a lot more conscious of what you're doing, how you're thinking, the arguments you're making, and how you come to a conclusion. So again, it's not a total mystery, but you're going to have to think about this, okay? To write well means you're going to have to think well. So we will put some thought into this. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll talk about how to write a good paper. First of all, what kind of paper are you going to be working on? This is something that's really going to affect how you approach it. Okay, there are a variety of different types of assignments that a prof might give you. It might be a response paper, which means you're going to be responding to something either you've heard in class or something that you've read. It could be a reflection, which has more to do with you and how you feel about something, how you've thought about something, how you understand something. They might refer to it as a think piece, which means they're giving you a new idea, something you probably haven't thought about before. And without any research, just kind of think your way through and figure out where your starting point is. So that's a fairly relaxed type of assignment. It may be an analysis where you're given something, maybe a poem, maybe a piece of literature, maybe a historical document, a variety of things where you need to analyze, figure out exactly what it is that you're looking at. You may have to do it with more than one at a time, in which case you might be asked to do a compare and contrast, but basically you're breaking down the elements and evaluating something. It may be an argumentative paper or a persuasive paper where you're coming up with an idea or a key argument that you want to convince somebody of. Quite often, particularly in literature, it's not going to be something that you can prove. It's going to be something that you'll have to convince someone to believe. So we'll talk more about that probably later on. It may be a literature review. This is very common in psychology, where you look at all the papers that are out there, all the study that's been done, the current state of discourse of a certain topic, and then you have to try and bring it all together and figure out where we're at, what are the next steps, right? So that's a bit more complicated. Or it could be something completely different. You never know what your prof is going to come up with or what they're going to ask you to do. So always look at the assignment very carefully, and if you're in doubt, ask questions, figure out what it is that you need to do. So what is the purpose of writing a paper? Why do profs ask you to write papers? First of all, you need to think critically around the topic. That may be defined for you, or you may be asked to come up with the topic yourself, but you need to think about it, and you need to think about it well. Critical thinking has to do with questioning, evaluating to the point where you have some kind of confidence about the topic. You need to familiarize yourself with the current discourse, that is the conversation that's already out there about your topic. Make sure you know what's going on, what people are saying, and how you can contribute to what's already been discussed. Once you've done that, you need to test the ideas. You test your ideas and other people's ideas, things that you come up with in your research, and kind of evaluate them, come to some kind of a critical resolution towards the end, something hopefully that's going to contribute to the conversation. And finally, you need to be able to present all of that, present all of your ideas clearly and convincingly, okay? So this is kind of an academic process, and you're just showing that you can do it and you know how to express that and to show that to your prof. There are steps in the process. They are a little bit fluid, but best to look at them in kind of a linear format to begin with. So, quick guide to the steps. Actually, I missed one. I'm starting with brainstorming, but the very first one is going to be understand what your assignment is. Know what it is that you're aiming for, know what it is that you're trying to do, what the expectations are, what the limitations of your assignment might be, that kind of thing. So understand, first of all, what it is that you're trying to do. Then you go into your brainstorming. That is, figure out what you think about it. What are your ideas? What do you understand about it? What are the questions that you have that you think need to be answered? So you need to get all of this straight in your head before you look on to what other people are thinking. And so that you can kind of differentiate your ideas from others and figure out exactly where you want to go with your assignment. So this is a fun part. This you can do with a coffee and a donut and your feet up on the desk. So it's the best part of writing by far. Once you know what you're thinking, now you do your research and find out what information is out there, what other people are thinking, what ideas are accepted, which ones are being challenged, that kind of thing. So you're looking for further information or further ideas coming from a field, okay? Now you have to organize all of that. You've got a bunch of your ideas you've put down and other ideas that you've taken in from your research. You have to put them together somehow, and you have to organize them so that you just don't have a whole pile of individual notes that don't relate to each other. You're going to have to figure out for yourself exactly how you want to organize all of those. Once you get to that point, now you can create your thesis statement. The thesis is the one single thing that your paper is going to be about. In a persuasive essay, it's going to be the one main argument that you're trying to convince somebody of, right? So figure out what the focus of your paper is and see if you can state that in one single sentence that covers what your thesis is. That is going to be the focus of your paper, and everything else in your paper is going to point towards that. It's going to point towards supporting and convincing someone that you have a great idea, a great thesis, okay? And you need to get this in place before you start the rest of your paper so that you know where you're going. Otherwise, you're going to wander about and never actually convince anyone of your argument. The next step is to outline your paper. You know what you're aiming for, and you've got all of this information that you've kind of organized into, various types of arguments, various points that need to be considered. Now you need to outline, how am I going to talk about that? What do I need to talk about first? What is my most important point? Which things are associated with each other? Outline as completely as you can so that when it comes time to write, you just need to follow your outline. You're not trying to scramble and hold everything in your hands at once. You're just dealing with one point at a time. Outlining is key, and I love to talk about that. It looks different for different people. You can always check with the Writing Center at this point and make sure that you've got your ideas in a logical manner, but get your outline together first before you move on to next steps. Now, this is where you start writing your first draft. The temptation is to look at your assignment, see what you're asked to do, sit down at the keyboard and start typing. But unless you've done these previous steps, you're going to wander about all over the place. It's not going to be cohesive. It's really going to be hard to pull it together. So the first steps are important before you sit down to write your draft. Write the draft complete if you can, right beginning to end. Get the whole thing out there. It can be messy. It can be ugly. It can be terrible spelling, terrible punctuation. At this point, you don't care. You're just trying to get the entire idea logically set out in your draft and written out, as one complete first effort. Now, here's the thing. After that, take a break, by all means. It's been a lot of work. Writing a first draft is a lot of work. Your brain has been working hard. Take some time. How much time depends on how much time you have to work with. At least take an evening off, do something else, spend it with friends, watching TV, whatever you want to do, go for a hike. Give your mind a rest. And it's amazing, while you're recreating, your brain keeps on going. It's amazing how much work it'll do while you're not there. So that when you come back and look at your paper, in order to revise, to check it out, to say, does this make sense? Do I need to reorganize something? Where are my weak points? Is it formatted right? Does it actually answer the question? When you come back to look at it, you'll be looking at it with fresh eyes. And a lot of the things that you didn't notice while you were writing will pop out to you, the issues that need to be addressed. Okay, so take that break. You deserve it. There's no doubt. Now do the revision so that everything makes sense. The argument flows. You can find out where your weak points are. You might decide, oh, I need a little more research on my second argument. It really doesn't hold together and it kind of makes the whole thing fall apart. You might want to step back, do some more research, iron things out, check out how that fits in your outline, and then fix up your draft. You might have to do this a few times. You repeat as necessary until you think you've got a draft that you're happy with, that you're going to be able to hand in, and you're satisfied with it. Only then do the editing and the proofreading, checking to make sure that your spelling is correct, that your grammar is correct, make sure that you haven't got any confusing sentences in there, make sure everything is expressed as clearly as possible. And then you do the proofreading, checking the punctuation, check your formatting, that kind of thing, right? Don't worry about the fine points of punctuation when you're writing your first draft. You don't want to waste time fixing a sentence and making it perfect if you're going to end up getting rid of it when you rewrite that paragraph. So save the editing and the proofreading until the end. Okay, so that looks like a fairly linear process, and it works well if you approach it that way. It doesn't always work that way. This is another view of what the process looks like. Slightly different terminology, but it gives you an idea that it can be a real mess and you have to respond to whatever situation you're in. Again, it starts with the assignment, understanding what you need to do, and then assessing your writing situation, which to me is kind of understanding the assignment. Who am I writing to? Who is my audience? What is my purpose? What is the tone I should use? How formal is this meant to be? Assess that before you move on. Generating ideas basically is brainstorming. It's the same thing. You're working within your own head and coming up with ideas and organizing things in a way that makes sense to you, so that when you come to your thesis, it's something that you can own, it's yours, and it's easy for you to work with and to defend. Now from there, you may move straight on to research, as I did in the previous example. You may start to focus your ideas first, focus your own ideas before you do the research, and then move into the research, see what you can find, move back to focusing your ideas, both yours and those that you found. Do all of that before you move on to the draft. Even during your draft, you might decide you need more research. So there's arrows pointing everywhere. You're making your way around the circle, but you may have to hop back and forth in order to complete each of the steps. Eventually, you're at the point where you can revise. And this is where you clean up your argument and make the paper look the way you want. It may take a couple of attempts, but eventually you're going to come up with something you're satisfied with. Then you edit, look for strong sentences, proper paragraphs, that kind of thing. Then proofread, and once you're finally done, submit and smile and go buy yourself a coffee. So it is kind of a messy process depending on which faculty you're in, what your course is, what the subject is, what type of assignment you're working on. The process may need to be adjusted a little bit. Don't feel bad about that. It's not a 1, 2, 3 kind of thing. It's not a checkbox exercise. But these are the steps. These are the processes that you're going to have to work through in order to write a paper. Just want to talk a little bit about using secondary sources. It's very important to differentiate your ideas from those that you're finding in your research, not just to avoid plagiarism, which is extremely important, but you will not develop a convincing, strong argument unless you understand how to use secondary sources. So first of all, you make your case in your own words, right? You start off by brainstorming with your own ideas, You develop your thesis in your own words. You make your case in your own words. You use secondary sources to support that. Remember, your paper is about you and your ideas. You want to maintain your voice. So make sure that you do that even when you're including secondary sources. Now, you may use the source to prove something. Most papers you won't be able to actually prove, you'll more be arguing. So it's going to support your arguments. Or you may use it to challenge your argument as well. You may find something out there that says exactly the opposite of what you want to say. Your prof is going to be aware of those ideas. So you're going to have to deal with them. You're going to have to say, you know, you're aware of the idea, but this is why your idea still has value, why it still stands. So you may use it in either of those ways. Or it may be much more benign. Sources may be there just to provide background information or to introduce an important term or an idea that's out there. Maybe it'll encapsulate the idea behind your thesis much more clearly than you could. So you might use a secondary source for that. So there's three ways to use them. Either you quote the borrowed text word for word. That's a quotation. This is important. It's got to be exactly word for word. The punctuation has to be the same. If there's a spelling mistake, it needs to show up exactly the same. You'll indicate that it's not your mistake. If you need to leave something out or you need to shorten something, there's very clear ways to do that, but you have to indicate exactly what the words are that you're quoting. Okay, it has to be very precise. Or you may paraphrase. Now, this means putting it in your own words. For one reason or another, maybe it's a long convoluted sentence that really doesn't make sense if you try to do a quotation. So you're going to have to paraphrase. You have to be faithful to the content of the original, but this one you do completely in your own words. And changing the word fast to quick does not mean you've now done it in your own words. Okay, you need to use completely your own words. Or you can summarize. If there is an idea that's developed over several pages or perhaps a chapter, you may have to summarize that into a single statement or a single idea. Again, this is done in your own words. If you have any questions about using secondary sources, about concerns of whether you're going to get nabbed with plagiarism, or if you've used it appropriately or not, you can check either with the reference librarian or with the Writing Center, and people can help you out with that. So that's it. The second video is going to go more deeply into each of these steps. But this is the basics. This will be your reference point then for your first attempts at writing a paper. So I hope that made sense. If not, you can always contact me or the Writing Center, and we'll take it from there. Have fun.